You want to know which players are set to boom in Week 12 for fantasy football? We're about to give you our picks. Welcome back, Fantasy Endgame community. I'm Pierre, he's Chris, and we're going to do as we do each and every week and give you the guys we think might go off based on matchups. These are some players that could put up big point totals for you. This is a good time to remind you that Fantasy Endgame is now sponsored by Manscaped, which is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped recently launched the ultimate men's hygiene bundle. It's called the Performance Package. You can join over 7 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this offer. If you use promo code ENDGAME, you get 20% off your order and free shipping worldwide. Again, just use code ENDGAME off any order on manscaped.com. All right, now let's get to our boom picks for Week 12. Chris, hit me up with your first one.
Ever since the 2021 fantasy football season ended, I said James Conner was going to be overdrafted in fantasy. I said all offseason, you're overdrafting James Conner in fantasy. He shouldn't be going as high as he is. Then when the season started, I said, James Conner is not going to get it done for your fantasy team. Stop counting on James Conner. And this went on for, 11 weeks. And you know what? I don't think I've been wrong yet. I mean, maybe once when he scored like 2 touchdowns, but that's really been it. But finally, Week 12 of the 2022 fantasy football season, I am going to say you must start James Conner this week. You have to start James Conner this week because he gets the Chargers, one of the worst run defenses. And James Conner really has almost no competition for touches in this offense right now. Eno Benjamin gone, Darrell Williams hurt, Keontae Ingram, barely involved. James Conner is seeing a huge snap share. He's seeing tons of carries. He's getting some receptions. And now he gets just a smash matchup. So finally, for the first time in really almost a year, almost a full calendar year, I can say with confidence, please start James Conner this week. You won't be disappointed. He's going to smash.
All right. Look, if you're in on James Conner, I think it's safe to say I will be too. But yeah, the matchup almost begs you to start him, so I'll go ahead and do that. All right, so let's talk about a guy who wasn't drafted, even in fantasy and in real life, and that is Jeff Wilson. So you might not remember, but before his bye week in Miami now, he went for 119 yards in the ground on just 17 carries and was definitely the lead back in Miami. So he's a guy that you kind of don't know what to expect because Raheem Mostert had been really good in Miami, but Jeff Wilson came along and just automatically became the number one guy. Mostert will still be involved, but I think it's safe to say this will be Jeff Wilson starting and leading the way in the backfield. So, look, this is maybe kind of an obvious take, but after last week and how rough all the boom picks did, I'm just going to go ahead and take this softball and say Jeff Wilson against the Houston run defense, you got to start him. Look, I'm not worried about whether Mostert's involved. There's going to be enough room for both these guys to feast, and I think that's because the Dolphins are going to obviously establish the run. Houston's run defense is bad enough. They can both be successful, but Wilson is a guy you should prefer. Look at who's getting more touches. Look at who's being used more in the red zone and near the goal line. Jeff Wilson may not completely take over this backfield, but he's the lead guy, and you have to start him this week. There are no teams on bye this week, and so you might have more options to pick from. You've got to go with upside. Who has the potential to have that huge point total? Wilson against Houston is definitely one of those guys. All right, let's keep going. Who's your next boom pick?
Early in the season, Christian Kirk looked like an absolute league winner, and then he went through that little stretch there where he wasn't very good, and we started to wonder, can you even start Christian Kirk anymore? But I kind of wonder, looking back, did we maybe overvalue how bad he was? Because when you look, he's only had 2 games with the less than 10 PPR fantasy points the entire season, and he's had a bunch of games where he's gone over 20 fantasy points. Christian Kirk has actually been really, really good in most games this year, and that should continue again against Baltimore, who's not a good secondary. And every time it looks like the secondary might get healthy and might get better, they get hurt again and guys start missing games. So, look, I know they just had a nice performance against the Panthers and Baker Mayfield, but that's the Panthers and Baker Mayfield. They're not even an NFL offense, to be honest. Baker Mayfield shouldn't even be a starting quarterback in this league. The Jaguars are coming out of their bye. They've had plenty of time to get ready for this game. They're going to make sure Christian Kirk is involved. He has tremendous weekly upside, and in this matchup, he should realize that tremendous weekly upside. So, Christian Kirk to me, one of those guys, wide receiver 2 with upside. Some weeks you might want to play him, some weeks you might not, but this is a week you definitely want to start Christian Kirk. If you've got him, get him in your lineups. He should boom.
Again, another one of those guys who has so much upside. Hard to keep him on your bench, but this week you definitely have to start him. Kind of feel the same way about DK Metcalf. I mean, obviously one of the most physically gifted receivers in the entire NFL, if not the most. He'll have his ups and downs, right? I mean, that's just how this offense is. And you think, look, with Kenneth Walker there leading the way and being so great on the ground and going against the Raiders this coming week, look, maybe they just won't have to pass that much. And that could be true, but I don't think they have to pass that much in order for DK Metcalf to go off. So I do like both receivers this week, but I prefer Metcalf over Lockett because, Lockett primarily works out of the slot. And where the Raiders have struggled, among other areas, which is pretty much every area, but mostly where they've struggled on defense has been containing outside receivers. And we saw young Sam Webb just get used and abused last week, and that was by Courtland Sutton, a bigger physical receiver. That's what DK Metcalf is. And you might not have noticed lately, over the last 3 games, Metcalf has really kind of taken over as the primary target over Lockett. Of course, they're both involved, but 25 targets over the last 3 games for Metcalf. He's in store for, I think, another good target share, and I think he can make some big plays against a very vulnerable secondary. So I love Metcalf. I think this could be another big week for him. All right, let's do one more pick each. Go ahead and give me your final boom pick for week 12.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing here, but this is going to be 2 weeks in a row where I pick a tight end, but there's some good streaming options at tight end this week, but I really like Logan Thomas going up against Atlanta. Kind of a forgotten guy this year because, coming off that major knee injury, couldn't really get on the field, then couldn't really do anything when he got on the field, but we finally saw last week, got involved, was heavily involved in that game, led the team in receiving yards. Not sure he's going to do that again because this is a good matchup for Terry McLaurin this week, but any tight end getting that involvement has tremendous upside, and in this matchup against the Falcons, you just want to get as many players against the Falcons as you possibly can. And Logan Thomas is one of those guys. He'll get red zone targets. He'll get end zone targets. He has touchdown upside. He had a nice game last week in a much tougher matchup. Now in a much easier matchup, I think he does even better. I think he finds the end zone. He's one of my favorite streaming tight ends this week. If you're going to the waiver wire because you lost Goddard or whatever and you need a tight end this week, grab Logan Thomas. He's out there on almost every single waiver wire. He should have a nice game, should have a big game, has potential for a touchdown, like Logan Thomas in week 12.
Yeah, you have to like streaming against Atlanta for sure. And I really like Terry McLaurin also this week. Of course, I mentioned him. He didn't boom last week as I predicted, so of course I think that just means he will boom this week. But I definitely like Logan Thomas. And again, there's not a lot of tight ends with that kind of huge upside, and he's definitely one to watch for. All right, and I'm going to go with a guy who is finally not just startable again, but dare I say this might be the week he gets back to being elite in fantasy. That's Michael Pittman. Obviously, what's gone on in Indy the last couple of weeks. Jonathan Taylor is clearly back. That's good news for everyone who drafted him with the number 1 pick. But look, Michael Pittman, even though he hasn't really had that breakout game yet, he's had 13 catches over the last 2 weeks. The yardage is steadily going up again. Not finding the end zone, that's what's holding him back from these huge fantasy point totals. But he has been involved even with Ellinger at quarterback, even with all the chaos that's gone on. He's never gone below 6 targets in a game. He is the number 1 guy there for sure, and that's what you want to target. You always go after the volume, even if the offense isn't great, even if the quarterback is okay. But now that we have at least a decent quarterback back in the fold and Indy is actually winning games, look, Michael Pittman just needs to score, and he could definitely do it because gets Pittsburgh this week, and that now this defense has given up the most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. They've given up plenty. I think that this could be the week that Pittman finally gets back to being the player we hoped he would be before the season starts. All right, those are our boom picks for week 12. Don't forget start, sit, trade, waiver wire coverage, and everything you need to know for fantasy football of week 12 is right here on this playlist. Check it out and keep it going.